So I'm making the main roller that's going to hold the fan, and the bearing on one end, and then it will have two bearings on the other end outside that it rests on. And then the front roller will be shorter, of course. Go between. I'm just going to use plywood because I don't want to bother making a metal frame at this point if I don't know how it works. Might need some improvement. So I'm going to weld this, MIG weld this on, and that will then hold the fan on it that way with a nut and a washer. On the other end, I'm going to put the bearing in. Initially I heated this red. So before I did that, I took this 1-inch bar from an old transmission, so it's quite hard, clamped that in the vise, and then used this big screwdriver and slowly worked around prying it out so I could get a lip that would allow this to enter. It's slightly bigger, but these were they're very prevalent bearings and they're quite cheap, and they'll take 15,000 RPM, so they're more than adequate for the job. And it's a very light load anyway. So that is how I did the first one, but now I've gotten the press fixed, so I will again stretch it out around this end, get the bearing started. I will heat it over by the press, get it red, and then press the bearing in. This is a scrap bearing, so I'll use that. It's one I took from the old table saw motor. It is this same series here. And then I will press that in, drive it out, do the same on this end, drive it out, and then I'll press in the good bearings. So nice to have a press again. So I found that it's possible to press this in cold once I flare the end. And I flare the end with the 1-inch bar, clamp this in here, and then 1/8 of an inch at a time, keep going around. It takes about 5 or 6 go arounds to get it big enough to fit the bearing, just to get it started. Once it's started, then I can line it up in the press and press it in. The purpose of the ABS pipe, this is 1 1/4 inch pipe, is strictly to make the roller slightly bigger, just to reduce its speed a little bit, and hopefully to reduce some of the noise. But I will press this in, and then the only way to get that pipe off will be to cut it. You do have to close the valve first. There. Just have to drive this on a bit more, which won't be hard. And then I'll tap this down to take out the dents and the holes and file off the rough edges. Here are the two rollers. Probably going to be the back one, and this will be the front one. They'll sit in the wooden frame like that. Homemade set screws. Just because the set screws I had were too high, they protruded too much. I was concerned the wheel might strike them. So that's what I'll do, and then these will get mounted with bolts. This one will have a bolt from the outside through the wood. This one will have a bolt from the outside through the wood, and then it will have two bearings here set in such a way that it will not want to kick out when it's forced by the wheel. I think it's time to finish a bike trainer project. I found these two old scrap pieces of wood. They have a nice finish on the outside. So this will be the inside. I've measured it with the 16-inch wheel on the trike. It needs about a foot in between and 4 inches from the top, or where the wheel rubs, which is almost the top, down to the ground in order to clear. And that gives me about an inch and a half of clearance. if I want to use a bigger bike on it, I should have enough room left on each end to move it out further. So I will start with that. I've marked them where I have to drill the holes, and I have some bolts that fit these as pegs, or I can put a threaded bolt right through it, threaded stock, and bolt it side to side, which I might just do that anyway, but it will be a process that will evolve. Don't know if I've shown a picture of the trike before or not, but there it is, floating skyward like Mary Poppins. So the plan is the back wheel will fit between the rollers, an inch and a half off the ground. See if my measurements are correct. And then worst case, I use the front brakes as I'm riding to keep it in position. Stop it floating back and forth, side to side. See how that works. So here's the plan at this point. I have this roller for the back. I have two spacers like that. Those will stop the bearing from rubbing on the top side and hold the bottom side in place. This bolt will go through with a spacer through that almost half-inch hole, 7/16 or so, and that will clamp those two together with this spacer right there. That will be the front roller. The back roller will mount here with a bolt. It will have a piece holding it across at the back, piece of wood, and another spacer, and then it will go through here, being supported by two bearings. So what I'm going to do now is I've got these bearings are not quite half an inch. They're a metric bearing, but they're only a few dollars each, so I bought 10 of them. Use them on various things. So to use them for this, I happen to have some bolts from a 47 Cadillac that I replaced that are just under half an inch. For some strange reason, the 47 Cadillac had a mixture of metric and imperial bolts, which was a big surprise. So that fits there. 7/16 will work. It's just a little bit loose, but if everything is clamped in place and held together, it won't be an issue in something like this. But I'm going to use these anyway. So what I'm going to do is I have a short one here, which should thread in as far as possible, and then a friction fit. See, that's no better. It's too short. So I will look for another one. These will hold the other side with nuts. When we moved, I guess I threw out, recycled most of these bolts. I can't remember exactly what they were for, possibly main bearings. They were replaced anyway. So I've had to go to a 7/16, which is a bit more sloppy there than I would like, but it will work. So this will hold that side. The bike rear wheel is here. This is the rear of the bike. The sprocket for the chain is here, so that won't interfere with the fan that sticks out on this side. So that will sit there. This, I'll change this, got it in the wrong hole. That will sit like that. And I'll have two bearings mounted underneath to hold this, to run on this metal and hold it all together. Or, sorry, hold it so that it clears the plywood and rotates freely. And then the fan will sit on this end with some restriction. And my hole saw was much more dull than I thought. I'll have to sharpen that. Cut a piece out of here, which I can glue back in, but a bit of a pain. Here it is so far. This one spins well. I have to get a longer bolt or threaded stock. It's not quite long enough. With this one, So it'll be held together with a board across the back and the front. It rides, so it spins on that. It's got a bearing in this end. Then it runs on these two bearings here. This pipe that I put over top to make it a little bit larger diameter so it doesn't spin quite as fast fits between the two bolts. The metal pipe, which is a shaft, working as a shaft, runs on the two bearings, and then the plastic pipe stops it from coming too far this way, so it can't come out. It is a bit noisy, so what I'm going to try and do is take this old bicycle tube and see if it will fit. It looks like it's too big, actually. Yeah, it's too big, so I need a smaller tube. The metal on metal contact is quite loud, so I happen to have a bunch of metric O-rings. So I've used R23, which is 30 millimeter inside diameter, 3.5 millimeter cross section, and then I used an R22, which is the same cross section but a little bit smaller, to try and hold these from moving. So the bearings will run on there and see if it's a whole lot quieter or not. So this is the unit at this point. The fan is enclosed in this coffee can. It just clears. There's about 1/8 of an inch clearance around the edge. I've made this hole and pushed it in and bent the edges over so that I can take the fan off, or tighten the nut rather, if I have to. I've opened a vent on the side to provide some restriction with airflow. We'll see how much difference that makes. I did try this out before, and it seems roughly the same load pedaling at 20 kilometers as I used to feel on the road, the gravel road. So that ought to be pretty close. One thing I likely have to do yet is to attach this one. I should have had a complete roller here, but initially I had planned to make the unit narrower, but that didn't work out. So I've got it this way now. Knobby tires are very noisy, so probably has to have a slick put on there. I had to cut this groove in the end with the chain, and I also found that if the tire was not hard, it ended up rubbing here because it just flexed just enough that the tire would hit on that edge. That could have been helped as well by bringing this roller up a little higher, but I chose to just inflate the tire instead. It is pretty noisy. A lot of that has to do with the knobby tire. These are not my normal workout duds, but what can you do? I have shoes with clips on them. I've attached the second roller the same way I did the first one, with screws into the metal tube down through the ABS. Fan is rubbing again. The fan has yet to be straightened out, and the knobby tire has to go. Other than that, it's quite adequate. I've countersunk screws and fixed both the rollers. That was due to a change in plans. Originally I had planned to make it the width of one of those segments. Didn't work out well with the length of tube I had, so if I had just made a shorter tube in the beginning, probably would have been fine, but it might still have interfered with the wood, with the chain. So I put the slick on. It's definitely much quieter than it was before. I still get something that's rattling when I get up to speed, so I've got to figure that out yet, but it is working. It's much quieter than it was. So here comes my ride to nowhere. In some ways it's nice to be riding indoors. The scenery doesn't change much. This is something I made quite a while ago because I was riding in the winter and it was very cold in the back. This design is loud mostly because of the metal pipe running on metal bearings. So it could be a lot quieter if you had plastic coating on the bearings and a plastic coating on the tube, or just one of them. That would reduce the dBs quite a bit. The other thing is that if you really want a quiet unit, you're probably going to have to buy one that's production made. If you want to make one yourself, chances are it's going to be a little bit noisier than something that's made in a factory. For me, it's not a problem. I put on the headphones, I'm down in the shop, and nobody can hear me. Hope this helps. Definitely not the shape I used to be. I think it's about time I tried this out, see if it actually works for some exercise. I've got my trike sitting on the stationary unit, got the video set up, got the headphones. Let's see what happens. Can I wear myself out and not wear out my ears? As soon as I flip my feet in. And 10 minutes later, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or even notify, or any of the above, or all of the above. Thank you.